What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Sunbelt Syndicate, the Round Ball Roundup edition. I am your host, Dominic Crissetto, presented to you always by the Dogs Media Network, collegefootballdogs.com, and W Energy. Be sure to check them out for all your energy drink needs. Again, they are not a carbonated beverage. It's more like your protein shake. You make as much as you want, but obviously there's a recommended dosage. But anyway, give them a try. Use the affiliate code down below, SB Syndicate, at checkout to let them know that we sent you guys over there. I do want to make a nice announcement here before we get rolling into the show. We do have two very special guests coming up, not on this episode tonight, but within the coming weeks. I think actually they're both going to be on the same show or maybe separate shows next week. We haven't finalized that just yet. But we have Trevor Everett from the Two Pointers podcast. He had me on his show early this season to talk some Sunbelt basketball. He's going to do the favor back on my side and talk to us a little bit about this MAC Sunbelt Challenge. So obviously that started off the early part of the season where the Sunbelt went on the road and played the MAC teams for the men. The opposite was true for the women. And now the opposite will come true on the other end for both the men and the women, as the men host and the women travel on the road to complete the MAC Sunbelt Challenge. But Trevor's going to jump in, give us a little overview of what we're going to see in some of those matchups from the MAC side and possibly a little bit from what he's seen out of the Sunbelt as well. Also, TJ O'Sullivan, host of ESPN Syracuse and writer for College Basketball Review. He's got daily rankings. So does Trevor, too, as well. For those of you who are really interested in rankings of basketball teams, those two do a phenomenal job with that. TJ is a Coastal Carolina grad, so he's definitely got a little bit of interest, even though he's covering more of the Northeast and the Syracuse side of things for basketball. Obviously, he's got his eye there on the Sunbelt as well. So wanted to mention those two coming on the show very soon to provide a little bit more back and forth than just seeing and listening to me, obviously. But, hey, I'm here, so we're going to do this thing and get going with all of the usual stuff that we get, and we will put this up on the screen for everyone to see here in a second. As we get rolling here, this one I called App to the Top, right? I'm stealing it from Southern Miss. They are at the top of the conference thus far, so they have been rolling here lately. Before we get into a little bit more of the finer details, let's go over kind of a quick review. I'm not going to do the whole synopsis as I've been doing for each game. We're going to break it down a little bit faster for this one and tell you just some scores as we go through. So we had from last Saturday, I'm going back all the way to last Saturday for some of these scores, and you'll see them on the screen as well as we roll through this. We had Georgia State and Coastal Carolina going to overtime, with Coastal getting the better of them in that one, with Easley Jr. going for 28 points and 12 rebounds, while Odom led the Panthers with 30 points, but obviously not enough as the Chanticleers get it done in that one. Marshall takes down Southern Miss in a little bit of a surprise, at least for me. They win that game 83-67, thanks in large part Nate Martin with 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. Austin Crowley led his side of the thing with 18 points there for the Golden Eagles. Troy and South Alabama had a little bit of a tight game. Troy takes that one 83-79. Jones with 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals in the game. Muhammad leads Troy with 23 points and 8 rebounds himself. A game that I attended, a great game to attend in general if you were just a college basketball fan. It didn't have to even be in the Sunbelt. But App State host James Madison for a battle at the top of the conference there. They win that one 82-76. Gregory goes for 14 points, 6 assists, 3 steals. So statistically, he stands out pretty good. But Justin Abson was a beast in that one, blocking all kinds of shots and getting around defensively to help the Mountaineers flip the script and start heading down the court the other way. Even though Terrence Edwards for James Madison led the way for the Dukes there with 25 points on the night. It wasn't enough, although it did get kind of close there at the end. I think some of the Mountaineer fans started leaving a little early, and the students started populating the stairways to get onto the court a little too soon, because with those foul throws, foul shots that they got toward the end, got a little bit closer than what a lot of people had thought it might be going in. Georgia Southern takes down ODU 76-70. Tyrone Moore goes for 21 points for the Eagles, and Jenkins leads the Monarchs with 20 points and 6 assists. So that's Saturday's games. We actually did have 2 on Sunday, one of them because of a little bit of a power issue, I think, down there at the Cajun Dome. So we actually had that one there for that reason. I think the other one, I got one not showing up, but ULM played Arkansas State and beats them 85-82. Ford goes for 20 points, 12 rebounds, but ULM's I'm gonna butcher this name because it's I believe it's Russian. Matis Vashar goes for 24 points and 11 rebounds for the Warhawks, but the Cajuns in this one on this day were the dominant team, going for 66 points. Folks leads the way with 23 points. Sykes only has 8 points to lead the Bobcats. It tells you how bad of a game they had, ultimately only scoring 46 points in that one. So obviously that one wasn't going to go the way that they wanted. We had 2 games Wednesday night. The Cajuns go up against the Warhawks there, win that one 80-72. Joe Charles, 19 points, 11 boards, and 3 steals to lead the way for the Cajuns. Watson has 21 points there for the Warhawks. As far as the other game of the night, Arkansas State beats Southern Miss 78-71 behind Fields' 27 points and 8 assists. Iwakur goes for 17 points, 12 rebounds, 3 blocks, but just not quite enough as the Red Wolves get the better of that matchup. Thursday, we had the rest of the conference slate going. One of the first games of Thursday night was App State taking on Georgia State. They win that one 81-71 behind Justin Abson's massive game in the second half specifically. 15 points, 16 rebounds, 7 blocks. He's been a shot blocking machine here lately, although I will say watching that first half, neither team looked impressive. Very, very sloppy play on both sides of the ball to get that game started. We had ODU taking out Marshall in what I would consider a very surprising game, as Bashan Alette, the league's leading scorer, even if he was not playing these past few games, would still be leading the league in scoring, has now been essentially kicked out of school. I haven't seen much more than that. So something happened. He put out a tweet saying there's 2 sides to every story. I'd love to hear both sides, because I honestly don't have any further details than what most of us have seen online in that regard. Disappointing ending to one of the best players in the league thus far this season. But with his loss, I didn't expect ODU to come out and win very many games here down the stretch, because, I mean, he's been quite impressively their best player. So disappointing end, no matter what really happened there, that one of the better players in the league is no longer on the team and competing against the rest of the players out there that are also leading the way in a lot of the regards for the statistical leaders in this conference. Caesar leads ODU with 20 points, 3 steals himself. Troy takes down Georgia Southern 84-63 behind Eugene's 28 points. Banks led the way for the Eagles with 16 there. James Madison gets back on the board after that disappointing loss they had to App State by going over the century mark and beating Coastal Carolina 105-67. TJ Bickerstaff returns to his early season form, going for 19.7 boards, while Meyer leads the way for Coastal with 20 points. And we rounded it out with Texas State taking out South Alabama 74-66. Sykes goes for 18 points, 11 boards, and Jones leads the way for the Jags with 16 points himself. A little frustrating watching that game, not because of the commentary. We actually had Brant write us something up on Texas State, so he did a great job calling that game. But unfortunately, as I'm tuning in, trying to watch a lot of that second half, I think I even caught most of the end of the first half there. The the ESPN Plus broadcast was not showing you the time remaining or the score. So tough to kind of watch a game where in basketball it's so fast and furious and you don't have a scoreboard to kind of keep you up to date on exactly what the score is. And you don't want the announcer saying that every single time there's a basket either. So it makes sense from their guard. I'm not even sure if they were aware that the scoreboard wasn't being shown on camera at all for the viewers at home. Hopefully they were made aware of that, and it did pop up there towards the end. And we even had one little storm court, as Trevor texted me, and I had seen that live, but I thought he meant that the students had come onto the court after the game was over. And I said, I was watching that game, and I turned it off pretty quick after it ended, but I didn't assume that anybody was going to storm the court. And then when he sends me that Twitter shot of that little kid running onto the court, I knew what he meant because I was watching in that moment. So a great little thing there that no one's getting in trouble for that. A kid, harmless kid. He actually a younger brother of one of the freshmen on Texas State's team there. So no harm, no foul. And the refs made sure to stop the game very quickly. So nothing transpired where he got injured. But I think he got a little applause there for the home crowd as he went out there on the court while the play was going on. But again, luckily they got him off of there and back in the stands where he should be, and nothing bad happened there. So let's take a look now at the standings, and just like we did weeks ago and we have been doing for the past few weeks, not only are the standings here, but we've got some arrows pointing up or down. That's really the movement that they've had since you've last seen this on one of the shows. So we've got a couple teams moving up. We've got more teams moving down. App State, obviously, with their win and their couple wins, actually, continue at the top of the conference at 9-1 and 18-4 overall. Troy jumps above James Madison with an 8-2 conference record, 14-8 overall. James Madison 7-3 within the conference, 19-3 overall. So still looking very good there on the overall record, even though they've dropped a few in conference now. Ragin' Cajuns have been on fire at 7-3 in the conference and 14-8 overall. They've made quite the jump up in the standings. Marshall 6-4 in the conference, 11-12 overall. So not an overall mark that they're really going to hark on. They didn't have the greatest start to the season. They've been a little bit better, but then they dropped this game against ODU, so a little questionable there. Southern Miss 6-4, same mark as Marshall, but they are 12-10 overall. Then we get into the records that aren't quite as good as we go further down. Two teams tied at 5-5 with Arkansas State and Georgia Southern. Red Wolves with a 9-13 overall record, while Georgia Southern sits at 5-17. Georgia State 4-6, 9-12 overall. Those three teams stay in the same place they were a week ago when we last took a look at this. ULM and South Alabama going separate ways, but both do have 3-7 records overall in the conference. Actually, group Coastal Carolina in with that as well, and they are making the same direction move as South Alabama, as they both move down a little bit there in the standings. And then we have the same two teams at the bottom of the conference thus far, with Texas State and ODU both sitting at a disappointing 2-8. Both teams, both programs, both schools, both fan bases definitely expected a lot more out of each of these teams going into the season. So both teams there disappointed in where they currently sit. So let's start off with some streaks here too. This is not going to be listed on what you're seeing visually, but I do want to mention a couple of these. Georgia State has now dropped 5 straight games. 2 of those games were to App State, but they also dropped the game there to Coastal Carolina and Georgia Southern, which they're not going to like that one. They did take the first game in that series, but ultimately dropped that second game. So they're not going to love that. South Alabama has dropped 4 straight games as well. So not a great look for them. And I'm going to try and bring up some of these scores as we look at them here, so I can tell you a little bit more about some of those teams that they've played in those games, so it makes a little bit more sense about what we're looking at as far as hot or cold goes in that regard. So Jaguars, like I said, dropped 4 straight games, and those games were to Louisiana, ULM, Troy, and Texas State. So I would say it's an even split there on what they thought or should have possibly one versus loss. At least you expect them to be competitive in that ULM and Texas State game. Not so much, really. Neither one of those games was ultimately all that close. Texas State a little closer in that 74-66 game. But again, having watched that one, it didn't feel like it was closer earlier on. And once there was 4 or 5 minutes left, you kind of knew where that one was headed. Troy and Louisiana, you do probably expect them to lose that game. But then we'll jump into Southern Miss here, who's dropped kind of surprising 2 straight games, at least for what I thought where Southern Miss could and should be at this point of the season. And their 2 games that they've dropped going into them should not have been dropped. They lose to Marshall 83-67, so not even a game that they probably shouldn't lose, but it wasn't even close. So you've got to think that they're a little bit frustrated with how that game went for them. Arkansas State was also a loss right after that, 78-71, not where they want to be. So we've talked about a little bit of the losing streaks. There's 3 teams with streaks in the direction they don't want to be moving into. Let's talk a little bit about teams with winning streaks. And we're going to start at the bottom, which means the team with the winning streak, but it's the smallest one, which has Troy stringing 3 straight games together thus far, while I drink a tad little sip of water here. Yeah, so they have 3 straight victories over Texas State, South Alabama, Georgia Southern. So really nothing to write home about, but they had dropped 2 straight games to South Alabama and Southern Miss. So they get a little revenge there against the Jags. But more importantly, they get to stay up there in second place, as you see on screen right now, by picking up those 3 straight victories before their schedule. Honestly, they have one of the best schedules to end the season. They have maybe a tough game against the Cajuns, and everything else should be an extremely winnable game for them. So honestly, if any of the other top teams slip up, Troy probably has the easiest schedule remaining in the conference. I'd expect them to be a number 1 or 2 seed going into the conference tournament at this point. A little early, but again, if I'm looking at the schedule right now, I'm thinking Troy has the easiest road left to get a top seed in Pensacola, right? I think that's where the Sun Belt Conference basketball tournament is held the last couple of years, and I think the next few years into the future as well. All right, so that covers 1 team, but we have 2 more teams that are also stringing together some victories. And the next team up is the Cajuns of Louisiana, having strung 6 straight together right here. Very, very impressive. We already know that they were one of the best teams in this conference. They did have some early season struggles, but they seem to be on the right path now. Again, winning 6 straight games. Not the toughest of opponents within those 6 games. They did lose to Troy before this win streak started. It'll be interesting to see if they can get through a lot more of this schedule, because listen to the end part of their schedule here. App State, ULM, that one probably should be a win. Southern Miss twice, and Troy. So tough schedule remaining for the Cajuns, but right now they seem to be rolling. If they can continue that for their next 3 games before they have to travel to Boone to play App State, they should be sitting in a pretty good spot. And by then, we may know a little bit more about Southern Miss and what they could present to the Cajuns in as far as the end of that season goes. But they've also got, like I said, Troy sandwiched in there. So not an easy finish for the Cajuns at all. App State, 7 wins strung together. James Madison twice in that span. Everything else probably should be a victory from the outside looking in before those games get played. They have had a few, maybe like 2 kind of closest calls. Both JMU games were pretty close. And even though it didn't look so close, that Georgia State game could have gotten ugly had they not turned it on better in that second half, in that second game against that one. But yeah, that is kind of the teams as they're laid out here. I wanted to make note of something really, really interesting, though, before we move on to where the women sit at this point. The 2 teams, there are 2 teams with winning records on the road so far in this conference. This includes out-of-conference games as well. 2 teams with winning records on the road. App State and James Madison. That's not going to surprise anybody that those are the 2 with the winning records on the roads. But listen to this statistic. The rest of the conference combined, Everybody else, sans 2 teams, everybody else is 33-90 overall on the road thus far this season. So that tells you right there, one of those markers or metrics that's going to possibly help propel a Sun Belt team to get an at-large bid. Maybe not this year, but somewhere into the future. That statistic must make a jump. It cannot remain that bad. Otherwise, people aren't going to respect this conference when it comes to basketball. They're just not going to do it when you can't go on the road and beat anybody. And 33-90 tells me that just about every team in this conference struggles to go on the road and beat anyone. And when you're looking at tournament bids and where you're going to place teams within a tournament field, you have to have a strong conference overall. If you're flirting with 500, that's pretty darn good. Over 500, those are probably going to be most of your Power 5 teams, as we call them in football. We know they don't exist in basketball, but it's just an easy way to describe it here. The bigger teams with more money in the bigger conferences. But you've got to be at least kind of close to 500 at the very least, at least something respectable. The Sun Belt doesn't play the toughest out-of-conference schedule as far as basketball is concerned. We've got a lot of D2, NAIA schools, don't even have that many teams ranked that, we've ended up playing, at least this year specifically. So that record must improve. It's not good at all, and it has to change for the view of this conference to get better. We have Eric jumping in saying, go Cajuns, absolutely. Again, one of the hottest teams in the league up there with App State stringing together a whole bunch of wins thus far. And yo boy Cars, go Peppers. Yes. I'm guessing the chili pepper, right? Cayenne, right? Isn't that the name of the mascot you guys used to have? Hopefully we can get Al on there. For those not unaware, there's a guy named, I think his first name's Corey. He's out there pushing Al, the alligator, the albino alligator, to become a mascot for the Cajuns. I think it's a great idea. It's not in the name, but it doesn't matter. Hell, I'm a fan of the Carolina Hurricanes, who are just down the road here. Their mascot is a pig. Okay? And he's one of the most beloved mascots, certainly in this area, but even kind of in the NHL. And people wonder, well, why is it a pig? Well, there's other meaning behind why it's a pig. And that same thing is true with Al, the albino alligator. It's not just an alligator for an alligator's sake. But again, go find Corey on Twitter. There's lots of stuff that's been shared if you haven't been aware. Even if you're not a Cajun fan, you don't want to support them, whatever, go support this because it's awesome. It's a great graphic. It's a great design, a great story behind it. He's got a whole write-up explaining why this makes perfect sense and total sense. They have one quick thing. They have more Gators per capita in the state of Louisiana than they do in the state of Florida. So anyone wants to say, well, the Florida team is the Gators. They're the true Gators. They have more Gators. They don't have more Gators. Cajun country has more Gators than Florida does. So it makes a lot of sense. It's really cool. I love to see the design ultimately, get bought into. Fortunately, it doesn't sound like that's happening, but the more push it gets, hopefully the more recognition it gets, and they can get that going in the right direction down there. And Eric is saying, yes, they're all hoping down there. And true story. I'm thinking he's probably referencing the Gators being a larger count there than the state of Florida, which, hey, state of Florida, get out of here. We don't really respect your Gators anyway. And I know that there's no love lost there with Cajun fans with who the Florida Gators head coach is as well. So we will move on, though, and take a look at the women's side. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we look at the women's side, let's talk about the matchups for Saturday. We just went over the scores from this past week, the standings as they look now. So let's now take all of that information and take a look at what we're going to see a little bit here on Saturday. App State going up against Georgia Southern down there in Statesboro, Georgia. This one going to be tighter than a lot of people expect, I think. Could App run away with it? Absolutely, they could. But if they play the way they did in that first half against Georgia State, this is going to be a close, tightly contested battle. If they play more like they did in the second half against Georgia State, expect App State to dominate. And, they could win by up to 20 points. So we'll have to see what it looks like down there. But Southern's really come on since conference play has started. That's where they've got their only win so far this year. So not going to be an easy team to beat, especially on their home court. ULM up against Arkansas State. I don't really know what to make of this one. Arkansas State leads the conference as of right now with 3-pointers made. I don't think they own the percentage, Mark. I can probably pull that up while we're talking here. Yeah, they do not have the 3-point percentage. That actually goes to the Cajuns. The Cajuns are leading the way in the 3-point percentage, but Arkansas State, the Red Wolves, do have the most 3-pointers made. So, 50-50, I guess there. You want to go by the percentage or how many have been made. But we do have that favoring the Red Wolves. I guess for that reason, I'll take them in this matchup against ULM. ULM not been the hottest team as of late anyway. James Madison and ODU. Again, this is a matchup that would have been a little bit more exciting had they had the leading scorer in Vashawn Alette. He's not there any longer. I expect JMU to take this one quite easily, even though ODU has come out and surprised. Again, they surprised Marshall this week, so maybe it's a little bit closer, but we've seen this game, I think, twice now already, and JMU's won pretty handily in those two matchups. So this will actually be the third time that very first game was not considered a conference game, so that's why you're seeing this matchup 3 times. And Yo Boy Carr's also saying the first and original swamp was down there in Louisiana, which makes sense. I would definitely think of swamplands more for Louisiana than Florida myself, so that makes sense there. ULM lost their number 1 player. I'm trying to think of who. Eric, if you want to share what the name of that gentleman is, that'd be great, because I'm going blank on that right now. I know you're talking about because I remember his name from last year, but I'm going blank on it at the moment right now. And we've got Troy matching up with Georgia State. He says number 34. That's not ringing any bells for me as far as the name goes, though. Anyway, I'll continue and I'll try and pull that up as we go. Troy versus Georgia State. That one's a 4 Eastern, 5 o'clock, or actually 4 Central, 5 o'clock Eastern start there on ESPN Plus. I expect Troy to continue winning the way that they have all season, really. If you look from the inside out, they are one of the best and most well-rounded teams in this conference. They don't do necessarily anything that's abundantly dominant in one form of the game. They're just really even across the board. They can attack you from outside at the 3-pointer. They can get inside, but they're just going to shoot from anywhere, and they're going to play solid defense, and that's what's getting them the wins. And again, as we touched on already, they have one of the easier schedules left in the conference, so I expect Troy to take this one over Georgia State as, again, they continue to slide here recently. Coastal Carolina matches up with Marshall. A couple days ago, probably would have thought Marshall would win this one quite soundly, but they've had some struggles here of late. Coastal Carolina hasn't been great either. We know that they just got trounced by James Madison. Sometimes when you get a game like that, you return to a little bit better form in the next one. So could this game be a little bit closer because of that? I'd like to think so. I'd like to think it's going to be an exciting game to watch as the 2 shades of green or teal, I guess, really, for the chance go at it. Southern Miss and Texas State. This one is just kind of like the one we just talked about. It's more of a toss-up at this point with what Southern Miss has done and where they could be and who they're missing and all kinds of stuff, man. Texas State has some really good players on their team. Brandon Love being one of the best shot blockers in the country as well. He's up there towards the top with Justin Abson, but will remain to be seen. At this point, I probably favor. I guess I'm gonna favor USM in that one. I'll take the Golden Eagles just because of their pedigree here in the last year or so, a little bit more than Texas State at this point. South Alabama and the Ragin' Cajuns. I don't see any reason to pick South in this one. I'm going to stick with the Cajuns rolling along and getting another victory as they end the night with the nightcap. And Yo Boy Cars thinks it's possible for 23-4 record for App State versus 18-8 Louisiana if both teams keep winning. I'd love to see it. And I'll say this right now. Unfortunately for me, I have agreed to a long weekend away camping with some buddies of mine, and I not only will not be in Boone, I won't even be able to see that game because I'll be so far in the cut that I won't have any reception at all. So hopefully for me, I come back to some good news and this A right here gets the victory, but I know Yo Boy Cars and the rest of the Cajun country down there is going to be cheering for me not to come back a literal happy camper, but we'll see about that one. I'm definitely glad that matchup is occurring. A few weeks ago, I hadn't even looked up that far ahead to know that they were even playing each other this year. But great to see that one, because as far as, postseason stuff goes, to have a strong matchup towards the end, get people talking about you, thinking about you, never a bad thing. He also says softball and baseball season coming up soon. Yeah, I believe the first games within this conference, or not within the conference, but first games for teams in this conference, I believe start up the 16th of February, I think is the date that I was looking at off the top of my head. I could be wrong there, but I think it's the 16th. So that covers Saturday's matchups. Quickly, before we get too long-winded here, let's go over where some of the women stand right now. We've got Marshall, Troy, and James Madison at the top three positions. They did not move from the last time we took a look at this. Marshall, a perfect 10-0 within the conference. Troy, right behind them, with a 9-1 record, followed closely by JMU, ODU, and ULM, all with 7-3 records. ODU making the jump back up a little bit after a few losses. They string together a few wins to get back up there. ULM and Georgia State both dropping down here a little bit, but both with good records overall. Again, ULM with that 7-3, as we said, tied with ODU and James Madison. Georgia State at 6-4 sits just above Arkansas State at 5-5, who kind of splits the conference right there as it is right now. USM at 4-6, 11-9 overall, tied there with App State at 4-6, and the Cajuns as well at 4-6. App State's dropped a few games here. We'll go over the streaks after we run through the rest of the standings here. Georgia Southern sits there at 3-7, losing a few as well. Texas State, Coastal Carolina, both tied at 2-8. Texas State just not having a good basketball season for men's or women's at this point. And then South Alabama, the only winless team within men's and women's basketball at 0-10, 7-15 overall. So not a great mark there. Again, South Alabama there with 12 straight losses. So they actually lost 2 straight before they even came in to conference play. Georgia Southern has also lost 6 straight. App State with 3 losses in a row. And Texas State, not much of a streak there, but they did lose 2 here in this past week. Obvious at that point to see why all 4 of those teams, are sitting there at the bottom 6 portion of the standings. As far as the good positive streaks are concerned, Southern Miss is up there with 2 in a row. ODU back on top with 3 straight. 2 teams at the top have 9 and 10 game wins respectively. Those 2 teams being Troy, they have the 9, and Marshall with the 10. That's pretty obvious. But yeah, easy to see. For those that are visually seeing this, all the movement here is in the middle of the conference, as we got the top 3 teams remaining the same and the bottom 3 teams remaining the same. Everybody else is going to move around here a little bit. I expect most of these top teams to stay where they're at, and certainly the bottom teams. I haven't been seeing anything that's going to make me change my mind on where they're sitting currently within the standings. So let's go over just quick stuff here before we wrap it up. Wanted to remind you we're presented by W Energy. Promo code down below at checkout, SB Syndicate. Can get you a little percentage off and throw a little something our way. So the conference leaders in points for the women. For those of you who haven't checked the show out before, anything in a different color. Green means positive. Red means it's gone down. That's since the last time they're on the list. If they don't have red or green beside their number, that means they haven't been on the list before the last time. So Izzy Higginbottom leads the way with Arkansas State Lady Red Wolves, with 23.2 points per game. Taryn Ward, even though Georgia Southern has struggled, still up there with 21.6 points per game. Dominique Davis, gotta love that guy named Dominique over here representing for Southern Miss. She's up there in third with 20.4 points per game. Tashika Portia for Troy, now on the list at 19.1 points per game. Faith Alston from App State drops a little bit, but still up there in the top 5, 18.6 points per game. And Aisha Bradford for the Warhawks at 18.5 points per game there. As far as the men are concerned, we've got some new scoring leaders. As mentioned, Vashawn Alette now off the Monarchs team and out of the basketball season. I guess for the rest of the time, I don't think you can really transfer at this point. But hey, you never know with the NCAA. They just kind of make up the rules as they go. So we'll see what happens there. Tyron Moore for Georgia Southern now officially leads the way at 19.2 points per game. Obina Ochili-Killen for Marshall is just behind him at 17.1. Kobe Julian jumps up here. Not a surprise. Cajuns get hot. Julian is a big part of why that is happening, obviously, and averages 17 points per game. Terrence Edwards, we went over and talked about one of his huge games he's had recently. He's up there for JMU with 16.8 points per game. As far as rebounds go, we've got Jaden Turner over there from Georgia State. He was up here in second place last time. He's flip-flop, I believe, with Joe Charles since the last time we've seen this graphic on screen. He's sitting up there with 10.8 rebounds per game. Joe Charles, again, as we just mentioned, just behind him at 10.7. So these two could easily flip-flop yet again before we see this next week. Janoka Ojoku for Coastal Carolina is at 10.4 rebounds per game. He's come on strong here as Coastal has had some games where they've been a little bit better, but again, getting crushed there by James Madison. They haven't had the best of luck against the Dukes in really any sport thus far this season. TJ Bickerstaff, very impressive player for the Dukes. He's on this list as well with 10.2 rebounds per game. Again, all of these statistics grabbed from conference play only, if you were wondering where some of these lists are coming from. As far as the assist leaders go, we've got Caleb Fields for the Red Wolves at 7 assists per game. Themis Folks, I guess I missed putting his school on there. Sorry about that, Themis. But he is a raging Cajun, dressed very nicely with the tie there for his graphic. He is up there in second place with 4.5 assists per game. Dwan Odom for the Panthers at Georgia State is up there at 4.1 assists per game. Nate Martin, he's just come on strong. He's been a beast here lately. He's jumped right up into these standings statistics with 3.9 assists per game. Jacob Connor also with Marshall at 3.8, so just behind him. They've got the double tandem down inside there with these guys, and they're just distributors of the basketball, helping Marshall get back to the winning ways, at least they hope, because they had that one struggle game against ODU here recently. Tyron Moore also up there, so not only a leading scorer, but also distributing the ball to his teammates down there in Statesboro at 3.7 assists per game. As far as blocks go, no surprise here. Justin Absent, also one of the leaders nationally, technically tied for second right now within the top 5 players for blocks per game. He is up there for the conference blocks, though, in first place at 3.6 blocks per game. Victor Iwakur, it's like, it reminds me of Star Wars. Iwakur, whatever. I'm probably still saying it wrong, but it sounds better when I pronounce it as a Star Wars reference with Ewok and then core at the end. Iwakur at 2.6 blocks per game. So there's where your difference is. Look at where Justin Absent is. A whole block per game average better than Victor down there in Southern Miss. So very impressive for what Justin Absent's been able to do this year. And he's also kind of rounded into form as far as the free throws go and scoring a few more points per game as well. So he continues to round into form. Hopefully for us App State fans, he doesn't get any kind of significant NIL offer to go anywhere else, because I'd love to see him continue on with the Mountaineers. But we'll see. NCAA is a free agent pool anymore these days, so who knows what's going to happen there. Isaiah Nelson for Arkansas State, 2.3 blocks per game. Jackson Fields for Troy, 1.7 blocks per game. Trayvon Spillers jumps into this list for the first time this season for App State with 1.4 blocks per game. So again, a tandem there down low defensively for the Mountaineers, helping them lead to more offense as they get down the court, and a big reason why they have been one of the biggest successes thus far this season. RJ Blankney for ODU up here with 1.3 blocks per game. Is leaders as far as three-point percentage go. Avery Felts, he was up top at the last time we checked this statistical category. He remains there, 28 of 57 so far this year, 4.91 as far as the three-point percentage goes. Tyrone Moore, again, not hard to find, right? He's one of the best scorers in this league, finds himself up here in second place as far as the three-point percentage go, 25 of 58 so far this season. Noah Friedel, he was up here all season last season. He's kind of warmed up a little bit more as the season's gone along this year. He's 25 of 65 so far there for the Dukes. And Tenori Lane for Georgia State has hit 30 of 85 shots for the Panthers to round out this week's leaderboard for what we've seen thus far in conference. Again, we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Some true better-than-me experts when it comes to basketball with both Trevor Everett. Sorry, I always want to say Trevor Elliott. I'm not sure why that is, why that rolls off the tongue for me a little bit better. But Trevor Everett from the Two Pointers podcast, as well as TJ O'Sullivan. Looking forward to getting to interact with both of those gentlemen and their knowledge base when it comes to basketball, helping us round into form here in the Sun Belt before some of this conference tournament plays starts up and possible at-large bid. We'll see. I'm going to have some gather some information and some feelings on that from those gentlemen before we talk with them. But it'll be interesting to see what their thoughts could be, with that being some sort of kind of possible scenario. I don't think it's great because, like I mentioned before, the weakness of some of these other teams in this conference, it's not going to boast you real high up when it comes to comparing you against other teams that may have better records and better conference play when it comes down to a final decision and blank resumes and all that stuff. Unfortunately, the lesser teams in this conference aren't helping the better teams in this conference in that regard. So that will remain to be seen. Again, brought to you by W Energy. Promo code down below, SB Syndicate, collegefootballdogs.com. Find us there for your football coverage during the offseason. We'll continue to provide you podcast coverage of many sports as we go along, and look for the upcoming college baseball dogs also covering your favorite teams from the Sun Belt Conference. I'll be heavily involved on the Sun Belt Conference part of that, but we've also got some guys that know a lot more of the SEC and ACC slate, as well as just across the country. They're going to keep you up to date. They've already released their top 25 rankings to start the season, and we do have a team up there in Coastal Carolina. I was making an argument we should have at least one or two more. We'll see how that goes. We've also got softball started up. We can get Preston back involved with the technical difficulties we had a week ago trying to get him on. But please remain tuning in. Come on in and comment. I love the interaction. I want to see more of it. I think we'll heat up as we get closer to tourney time, when everyone gets a little bit more excited for basketball. But once again, thanks for tuning in. I've been your host, Dominic Rossetto, and we will see you guys next time.